An unearthed picture of Donald Trump and Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation and leader of Project 2025, is making the rounds on social media. Trump said that he does not know who is behind Project 2025, although this photo from 2022 shows him together with Kevin Roberts.
This photo conflicts with Trump's insistence that he knows very little about Project 2025, a policy blueprint for the next GOP administration. For weeks, Trump has attempted to distance himself from the plan, but Democrats are continuing to link the GOP nominee to it. According to a new University of Massachusetts Amherst poll, Project 2025 is deeply unpopular. The poll found that 53% of Americans, 2/3 of whom are Democrats, indicated that they had read, seen, or heard at least something about the project, and they aren't keen on it. Roberts, now the head of Project 2025, announced that the release date for his forthcoming book, called Dawn's Early Light: Taking Back Washington to Save America, which includes details about the plan, has been pushed back till after the November election. I mean, this is wild. Okay. Over 140 former Trump administration officials helped draft Project 2025. The fact that Donald Trump is somehow trying to pretend that he had no relationship with Kevin Roberts and the Heritage Foundation. I mean, the Heritage Foundation is a key part of the Republican Party's ideological, backing. Would you not say that? And the fact that they were on the plane together. And Kevin Roberts already said that he had a good relationship and had briefed Donald Trump on Project 2025.
Yeah, I think they're friends, but I would say that the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 in particular, at least from an economic perspective, has a lot of divorced ideas from the Trump campaign. And I also know that Trump has his own agenda, which is Agenda 47, which you can look at if you want to know what his policies are. I know Kamala Harris doesn't have any of those on her website yet. But I think all of this, obsession with Project 2025 is really overblown. It's pretty standard for think tanks to prepare materials for an incoming administration that they hope they're going to use. That doesn't mean that Trump is obligated or mandated to accept any of them. Doesn't mean that he was personally involved in it. I mean, I think we can look at the Center for American Progress as a key foil on the left, right? There are a lot of people who have funneled in and out of the Biden administration who have gone on to work for liberal think tanks, and I think it's the same thing here.
I mean, Cap, fair enough, but Cap also was very involved in the policy decisions that are made on the platform committee, and they're a part of the platform committee. We're more democratic. There are union members in the platform committee. There are
very democratic to push
leaders
out the nominee who received 14 million votes for someone who didn't receive any.
Well, Kamala Harris was on the ticket, so she did receive those votes as well, and she campaigned with President Biden on that ticket. So, she did run around the country, give speeches, and do debates, and she was part of the ticket that won President Biden the nomination. But with that being said, we do have a platform committee coming up. And how the platforms are played out in the Democratic Party, it's messy. I'm not saying that the administration will stay to that platform. I wish that the administration would, because the last platform was the most progressive platform in the Democratic Party's history. The Republicans, on the other hand, these are 140 former members of the Trump administration were part of drafting Project 2025. You don't think that they go hand in hand?
Well, I know who was involved in the platform committee at the Republican National Convention, and it was Trump's team. It wasn't people from the Heritage Foundation.
But Trump's team, 140 former members.
Former people who worked in his administration,
yes.
Not people who are currently on the campaign.
Well, it's kind of mysterious who's on the campaign because there's so many people coming in and out, and obviously the two campaign managers are not really in Donald Trump's ear, and he's going on stage just saying whatever he wants to say. J.D. Vance wrote the foreword for this book, Kevin Roberts' book. J.D. Vance, of course, is leaning in on his populist messaging. So I'm confused. Is the Heritage Foundation book, Project 2025, populist, or is it not? Because child labor standards, for instance, in this are pretty abysmal.
And that's why I'm saying that there is daylight between the two, because I don't think the Heritage Foundation is as economically populist as J.D. Vance is, and historically hasn't been. It historically has been a more free market maximizing place, and that has been one of the criticisms of the Republican Party from Trump's base, is that they for a long time have said that, corporate tax cuts or offshoring manufacturing to get cheaper labor is more important than making sure that American workers are protected. And that's something that the Trump-Vance campaign has been talking about and has been very critical of. Trump, of course, one of his biggest issues in 2015 was talking about the fact that the U.S. is so involved in regime change wars, that we don't use the power of tariffs to make sure that American manufacturing is protected, that we don't build things in this country anymore. People aren't able to get stable, high-wage employment. So, yeah, I don't find this Project 2025 thing to be at all consistent with what the Trump campaign is talking about or would do if he were elected to office. I think Agenda 47 is very clear on his website, and his campaign I don't think is mysterious at all. We know who's on the campaign. They all have it in their Twitter bios. But yeah, I think J.D. Vance and Kevin Roberts are friends, just like a lot of people in the conservative movement. Surprise, surprise, there's not a lot of us in D.C. We all do know each other, and we all treat each other with respect and sometimes do favors for each other. That doesn't mean that we agree on every single issue.
I mean, writing a foreword to a book, and obviously it's definitely...
And we don't know what's in the book.
It's impacting the race in that he has decided to not publish until after the election, which shows, I mean, this goes to the point. Who is J.D. Vance? You know, he used to be an anti-Trump guy. Then he was a libertarian. He's backed by Peter Thiel, and now he's a populist. But he was also a tech executive. He was criticizing Silicon Valley, but he worked in Silicon Valley as a VC. I mean, we don't really know who this guy is at the end of the day. And that's not great for the Trump campaign, because here you are talking about another platform, Agenda 47, when there's
It's not another platform, it's his platform. And I don't think it's hard to know who J.D. Vance is, because he has a literal book about his upbringing and has explained in very thorough detail why he changed his mind on former President Donald Trump. And I don't think the same could be said of Kamala Harris, who has yet to explain why she has shifted so dramatically from policy positions during the Democratic primary in 2019 to where she stands today.
But I thought you said you didn't know where she stands today, so how do you know she shifted?
Well, it's a good point. She doesn't have a policy platform, but based on what we know that her aides are feeding to the media, she's trying to make some kind of run to the center, because her campaign aides have said to the media that she no longer supports banning fracking. She now claims that she's going to secure the border when her administration had 3.5 years to do it and completely failed.
Guess what? Immigration is down over the border right now.
It's still above, significantly above, the highest month that Trump experienced, which was in May of 2019.
Do you think that has anything to do with maybe Donald Trump's policies when it comes to Latin America? Do you think it has anything to do with that at all, especially given Venezuela and oil? I mean, the reliance that Trump Putin has in particular with his relationship with Venezuela. I mean, these are key factors as to why there is border instability. I mean, there's also, CBS reported that the majority of those coming over the border right now are actually Chinese immigrants. I mean, we could go on and on about why the border is the way it is. But to say that there is no security at the border right now in comparison to Donald Trump, yeah, you know what? Joe Biden isn't putting kids in cages and making money off of it. I mean, there were contractors at the...
It was when he was vice president for Barack Obama that they started putting kids in cages.
There were no contractors that were tied to the administration making money off of separating children at the border.
Health and Human
Obama
Services
and
put kids in cages during the Obama administration as
didn't
early
separate children.
as 2014. Actually, they did. And you can listen to DHS Secretary Jay Johnson, who admitted to that fact.
Were there contractors in the Obama-Biden administration making money off of building the cages as there were in the Trump administration?
I don't know who was making money off of it. I'm sure that somebody was. He'd be hard-pressed to find just about anything that wasn't government contracted, but we do know that the Obama administration did, in fact, separate kids from their
Not
families.
at the rate that, and it was not in the policy level. I mean, it was not a plan orchestrated internally.
It wasn't
by
a plan
Stephen
for
Miller.
Trump.
I mean, Stephen Miller's life mission is to separate people at the border.
Okay, that's not true. So the policy that was under Trump was not a family separation policy. I understand that's the way it was sold in the media. The policy was that every single person who crosses the border illegally is going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and be removed from the country. There was a zero tolerance policy for illegal crossings. Unfortunately, under Bill Clinton, there was a Flores settlement, the Flores Agreement, which said that you cannot hold families together for more than 72 hours because you want to protect children from the potential of being abused by adults. So if children were held in not captivity, but if they were held in the HHS facilities for longer than 72 hours, they had to be separated from their families because they did not want a bunch of grown men around young children in these facilities. That was the crux of the Flores
settlement. This is what Republicans do so well, and this is what Stephen Miller does so so well. He
Explain
finds
the policy.
loopholes. No, he finds loopholes in the law and uses them as his weapon to keep these families apart. But again, let's go back to Project
the Trump
2025.
administration tried to end the Flores agreement, right?
Let's go back to Project
hold them
2025.
separately?
Project 2025.
Because you don't want to talk about the fact that you're
No, I just think that we're getting off
separation.
topic here, and I think this is the problem right now with the Trump campaign is that they don't know what they stand for. You have J.D. Vance, who is running on one thing, who has a history in another area, is attacking, saying that Tim Walz is a San Francisco liberal. Tim Walz didn't even go to San Francisco for the first time until literally last week. Tim Walz went to San Francisco for the first time in his entire life, whereas J.D. Vance actually worked in San Francisco, made money in the tech sector as a VC, is nowhere near his hillbilly elegy working class background. He went to Ivy League schools, and he's getting backed by Peter Thiel, who is the biggest libertarian on the planet. So I don't understand how you can be backed by libertarians, have a libertarian background, and somehow be a populist at the same time. And that's why I think it's confusing when you have Agenda 47 and Project 2025.
It's not
the American
confusing.
people don't know what you stand for. And if you have to explain, you're losing.
Right. It's not confusing. The reason that people are confused is because the left continues to lie about the fact that Project 2025 is Trump's agenda when he has his own policy platform on his website. And if your contention is that J.D. Vance is going to govern like a libertarian because he sometimes receives backing from libertarians, I guess I would ask you, does that mean that Tim Walz is an anti-Semite because he had a Muslim cleric show up 5 times?
I'm sorry, what?
Let me finish. Let me ask
Tim
you the
Walz
question.
isn't accepting millions and millions of dollars from Peter Thiel.
Can I ask the question? Okay, so 5 times when he was in the governor's mansion in Minnesota, he invited a Muslim cleric who celebrated the October 7th attacks on Israel by Hamas and showed regular screenings of a pro-Hitler film to the members of his organization. So if it's guilt by association, then you have to hold the same standard that you just held J.D. Vance to.
He's taking money from Peter Thiel.
And he had this guy in the governor's mansion. So what's the difference?
I'm sorry. I'm on stage with you right now. Are you a Bernie Sanders supporter because you're sitting next to me having a conversation?
That's exactly my point. You're
no.
guilt by
Taking money from
association.
somebody. No.
And so the left
J.D.
never
Vance's
takes
career was supported by Peter Thiel.
And the left never takes money from people that they don't agree with on every single issue.
Peter Thiel has given more money to J.D. Vance than anybody you could make that comment about by $27 donations of Bernie Sanders.
And guess what? J.D. Vance is a senator right now. You can look at his record and see that he has not governed as a libertarian. And one final point for you on how he has abandoned his hillbilly roots. I will tell you, I'm a hillbilly, okay? I grew up with working class parents. My mom was a homemaker. My dad was a plumber. I went to Georgetown. And you know what? I carry a lot of guilt about the fact that I left my community behind and that I went to an elite college and that I do really well for myself. That's not an easy thing, not an easy burden to carry. So I think anyone who would actually criticize J.D. Vance for doing well for himself and yet still tries to give back to the people that he left behind and create policy that creates better opportunities for them so that they can do the same thing he did, I think that's a disgusting attack.
Well, I don't think that's what's happening. He was a venture capitalist, and venture capitalists are not sitting there supporting working people. If he was doing that, then he'd give back and go back to his community, become a social worker, do things on the ground with working people. But instead, he's exploiting working people, and he's using the story of working people, having also grown up in the Rust Belt, Buffalo, New York, in a rural community. I can tell you, you can make a choice in life. You either go and you support the working people on the ground, or you exploit them. And he's used their stories as his stories. He's made a movie and a blockbuster book about this, and then he went to San Francisco and made a ton of money in the venture capital world. Tim Walz has never made over $175,000 a year. He collects
4 government pensions.
Which
where do you think they're invested in? What do you think they're invested in? Right.
Government pensions are a dream. I think everybody should have a right to have one.
Yeah, and they're invested in the stock market that you accuse J.D. Vance of using to manipulate working class people. We're going to be back with more Rising after this.